Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. BRICS, a group of the world's economies creating a reserve currency pool worth over $100 billion, representing the biggest modern threat to the US dollar. But first, let's briefly cover the term reserve currency, a body responsible for monitoring the international monetary system, better known as the International Monetary Fund, recognizes 8 major reserve currencies: the Australian dollar, British pound, Canadian dollar, Chinese renminbi, Euro, Japanese yen, Swiss franc, and the US dollar. Tens of reserve currencies have come and gone with the evolution of the world's geopolitical order. Reserve currency is a foreign currency used in any kind of international transactions, such as international investments, international trade, and all other aspects of the global economy. From the 19th to the first half of the 20th century, the United Kingdom's pound sterling was the primary reserve currency in the world. However, the US dollar managed to take its place and become the main reserve currency in the middle of the 20th century. Because the US dollar just became a reserve currency, it made the world's need for dollars skyrocket, which allowed the United States government to take loans at lower costs. This gave the United States an advantage in annual excess of $100 billion. That's how they can afford to build parking lots anywhere and everywhere. But why was the United Kingdom's pound sterling abandoned for the US dollar? Well, after World War I, the United Kingdom almost bankrupted itself, but still somehow managed to stay known as the main reserve currency. However, after World War II ended, the United Kingdom found itself once again in the same situation, but this time the US dollar overpowered the pound sterling and became the world's most important means of exchange. During World War I, the US dollar was always backed by gold, which means the US government operated under a gold standard. The value of the US dollar was pegged to the value of gold. For every $1 in circulation, there was $1 worth of gold held by the central bank issuing the dollar. This means you were able to simply exchange dollars in your bank account for gold from the same bank. The US dollar stopped being backed by gold in 1933 due to the post-World War period. Many changes in the world suddenly appeared, especially ones linked with political alliances, which created a lack of confidence in the gold standard. It became obvious that the world had to base its economy on something more flexible. So not only did the United States government become more able to borrow money at a lower cost because their currency was global might, but also to use the US dollar as a tool of diplomacy. You see, once the US dollar became the global reserve currency, it made every other country that traded with the US dollar dependent on them. And these countries aren't only dependent on the United States if they're using US dollars to trade, but even if they're interacting with US banks in any way, or even hiring US companies. So if the US government doesn't like a trade some country made using US dollars, they can immediately freeze or seize that trade, as well as any other asset that the country owns that's linked with the United States in any way, which is near impossible. This is better known as the United States strategy to make the dollar indestructible. What can we say? Freedom, baby! As time passed, more and more countries started realizing they couldn't import nor export anything without the United States above their head. However, the countries you can see on the screen never had any problems with this since they're members of the G7 group along with the United States at the top. The G7 group is the name for the consultative forum of the 7 most important industrial countries in the world. They discuss world political relations, peace in the world, and global problems of the world economy, such as international debts, energy, environmental protection, international arms, and drug trade. They are what BRICS is fighting against. Let me show you an example that will bring this closer to you. There's a company in Buenos Aires, Argentina that produces washing machines and refrigerators using Chinese machinery and parts. So instead of importing from China in US dollars, company headquarters made an agreement with China to pay for all the parts in Chinese yuan. Adaptation to yuan wasn't easy, but it's definitely worth it. Instead of depending on the US, countries of BRICS are making a world-changing reserve currency, which may put an end to the US dollar, since it bypasses the United States strategy to make the dollar indestructible. It's predicted that these fast-growing economies will collectively dominate the global economy by 2050. As of 2018, they had an estimated $4.5 trillion in combined foreign reserves. That's quite a number for a reserve currency that's only 8 years old. And according to data from the International Monetary Fund, BRICS had already overtaken G7's nation's share of the global economy. In the past few years, China significantly expanded BRICS. The United States didn't like that, so they're working on shifting their supply chains away from China. Russia also made some smart moves after Putin realized this could be an easy way to gain more international allies that would balance out all the sanctions Russia got due to the war against Ukraine. South Africa's president, Cyril Ramaphosa, is proud to be a part of BRICS and is publicly supporting the expansion, and so is Brazil, even though Brazil, as well as India, want a more measured approach, so they're demanding various requests that would establish a balance among the members. As of today, previously mentioned Argentina and more than 20 other countries have applied for membership. Some of them have quite developed economies, such as Saudi Arabia, which is a major economic and energy power in the Middle East. It would be such a strong candidate that its initials would accompany BRICS' name. Indonesia is also one of the candidates for membership. It has the world's fourth largest population. Just these two countries show us that BRICS' future is bright. One of the main reasons why more and more countries want to join BRICS is gaining access to the new development bank established by BRICS. This bank approved more than $30 billion in loans for infrastructure projects since it was established back in 2014, with a starting capital of $50 billion. And in 2020 alone, it had 53 projects underway worth around $15 billion. That sounds extremely appealing to any country. Loan requirements are much more simple and more favorable. I assume you realize how this attracts future members, but more importantly, the main reason why every country would love to be a part of BRICS is its plan to enhance the usage of local currencies for trade and financing among BRICS nations instead of the US dollar. But is there anything standing in the BRICS path other than G7? There's only one thing worth mentioning: a united voice. In order to conquer the whole world, nations of BRICS will need to unite their voice and overall opinions about the major global issues. So that's the reason why BRICS still have to think twice before allowing membership to a specific country, because a united voice is far more valuable than the number of nations inside BRICS. One thing is sure, in the next decade or two, the US dollar will lose its value in the field of global trading, which may lead to global conflict, since we all know how holy the dollar is for the United States. We'd love to hear your opinions about this down below, and don't forget to like the video if you learned something new.